welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. We have a fantastic episode today. We've got Mark Goulston, who is an absolute fascinating person. He has a great history and background, ex-professor at UCLA. He's worked alongside the FBI. He's got so many interesting stories that I just was really compelled to reach out to him and get him on here to share some of those with you. Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us. Can you just give a brief introduction of your amazing career, and then we can get straight into it from there?
Well, I trained as a psychiatrist at UCLA, and I focused on suicide prevention. And for 25 years, none of my patients killed themselves. And I've been trying to figure out what it is that I did that caused them to choose life over death. And I actually have a new book out called Why Cope When You Can Heal. It's out in the last couple of weeks. And I've introduced to the world the method that I think I use called surgical empathy. Surgical empathy. And what that means is when you go in and get where another person's coming from, that they're not talking to you about. So often what people talk about is not what's going on underneath, but when you can go in and get where people are really coming from, they will lean towards you. And something I'll share that hopefully your listeners and viewers will find interesting, but more than that, something they can use. I spoke in Moscow a year ago with a Nobel Prize winner, Daniel Kahneman. He wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow, and we were co-headliners on that day. I have 9 books, and 5 of them are bestsellers in Russia. But what I introduced to the audience, and I'll introduce to your audience, and if you practice this once a day for a week, it will change your life. What I introduce to them is when you focus on what people are listening for and you get it right, people lean towards you. That's different than focusing on what they're listening to. So I'm going to demonstrate it with KC, and if it works, you're going to have a different experience, okay?
Okay, yeah.
So if I focus on what you're listening to, you have certain things that you want to cover, probably a checklist. You have a format, you want to bring things out, you want to make sure that I cover all of those things, and you're hopefully checking boxes that I'm covering those things. And if it's informative, it'll be, a decent conversation, and you're listening to me to give you that information. But if instead I focus on what you're listening for, and this is what you haven't told me, and I get it right, it's going to feel different to you and your viewers and listeners. And I think what you're listening for is you value and want to honor the trust that your viewers and your clients have in you. It's very important that you honor it and value it. And so what you're listening for is information that your viewers and listeners and maybe some of your clients can use immediately. And information that it's doable by them immediately that will make their lives much better, much more successful. What you're also listening for is having experts on who have amazing books, but they're just awful. And you have to protect your viewers and listeners from them. You have to go back and say to those people, I'm sorry, maybe we can do it over again, because you want to protect your viewers from wasting their time. So is any of that accurate?
Yeah, that's actually really accurate. And a lot of what I do in the style in which we do this podcast and the video on YouTube is to have the experts speak. And then as things kind of resonate, or I think that's a really good point, I'll kind of interrupt that conversation and drill deeper into that, because I think that's an actionable nugget that the audience can then take away and actually implement pretty quickly, rather than having to sit through days or weeks worth of seminars or courses or read books that, people can get a fast track of action items relatively quickly through a conversation like this, as opposed to a longer form.
And I'll give you a negotiation tactic that's built on this that you might also find useful. So have you ever been in a conversation and it's transactional, but your gut is telling you it's not going anywhere? They're asking you questions, you're asking them questions, and you have a feeling that Uh, they may nod from the neck up, but they're not going to do anything. We've
Yeah.
all been in those conversations. So here is a 3-step way to switch it around and flip it around. And what you do is if your gut is telling you this isn't going anywhere good, the tendency is often to pick up speed and then you throw all kinds of things and you drive them away. But if instead you can pause, look at them and say, I want to stop for a moment. And that's going to re-engage them. I'm going to say, what? Say, I want to stop for a moment because I have a feeling that you're listening for something in this conversation. And you're listening for something specific that you really need. And I have a feeling we haven't covered that. Can you tell me what that might be? They'll pause. Say, no, uh, what are you listening for that's critical or urgent that we haven't covered? And they'll open up. And then the second question is, I'm glad you shared that with me. Why is that so critical or urgent or important? They open up to you more. And then what's happening is they're opening up more to you than they do to anyone else. And then what you want to do is lean in and say, what's really going on? You're going to go, what? Yeah, what's really going on in what you asked? Because I think if we can address that, this could be a better conversation than where it was heading.
That's super interesting, and it resonates with me on a level that I've heard something very similar to that from Tony Robbins, who is obviously one of the greatest public speakers of at least my generation. And he's made a living of repackaging successful techniques and tools and NLP and all this amazing stuff. And he says something very similar is understand the situation, really dig into it, and make sure that you're not overthinking it and you're not missing it, but you are actually resonating with what the real issue is at hand. I think you put it a lot simpler and a lot more actionable steps than the way Tony describes it. But yeah, I think that's really good actionable advice.
Well, here's the look, and I think Tony has great information, but at his heart, Tony is a transactional person. And that's why he's built such a huge success. And I think if you can pose the questions the way I'm asking, people will open up. Now, here's the hesitation. I wrote an article on why people are afraid to empathize, because those 3 steps really help you empathize with where someone's coming from, what's important to them. A lot of times we're afraid to empathize with someone because what if they bring up something that has nothing to do with what we're selling or nothing that we even know about? We're going to walk away empty. But the point is, if you can lean in and actually care about what that is, and in this day and age, we all have great networks. Uh, and I can tell you, years ago, I used to do something called the Miracle on 34th Street sale. And if anyone knows about that classic movie, what happened is the person who was playing Santa Claus, when people came to him at one of the department stores, he would say, oh, you can get it cheaper at the other store. And what he was doing is he was building trust. So if you use this method and you have a great network, you're able to say, and I called it the Miracle on 34th Street sale, because I would sometimes meet with people, and when I would drill down, I would say to them, yeah, you could hire me, but there are 3 things you got to fix first. I am not a priority, but these are the 3 things that you need to get done and get done well. And I happen to know excellent people. If you can't do it internally, I collect excellent people who consistently deliver better than very good. And I'm in a position to introduce you to them. I don't get any referral fees, but I think you need to take care of these 3 things before you bring in someone like me. And for a while, I was kind of a legend because because I heard in the network of people, they'd say, how many times have you met someone who drove 2 hours each way and could have sold you, and they told you not to buy from them?
It's building deeper relationships is what I see that as. And I think in the world that we live in right now, everything seems to be instant or fast or overnight or the perception of that. But nothing really replaces building trust and value and real relationships and deep, meaningful relationships. That's what I'm hearing a lot of when you shared that story.
Well, it's absolutely true. And actually, on LinkedIn, I've started a show on LinkedIn Live. And if you go to Mark Goulston Restream, Mark Goulston Restream, you will see we're archiving the episodes, and it's called No Strings Attached.
And just to pause you there for a second, anyone listening or watching, we'll put the links to all these below so you can access them pretty easily. Sorry, Mark, continue on.
Yeah. So and here this was our way, and my team and I was listening. Tell me if you think I got it right. I was listening into what does an avatar of LinkedIn, what is it listening for? So superficially, oh, I'm going to get business. I'm going to get hired. I'm going to make a sale. But when we leaned in, what we felt an avatar of LinkedIn is listening for is a break from transaction fatigue, because everybody's hitting on everyone. So no strings attached is literally that. My guests and I will give away our best tips and tools with no strings attached. You can monetize them. You can turn them into courses. You don't owe us anything. And you don't even have to attribute it to us. It is really 100% pure grade generosity. And when I have my guests on, and I have a list of 100 people who want to be guests, because I have another podcast, and they say, oh, count me in. And I said, well, this is what you're going to do. You're going to give away an actionable tip. You're not going to sell a course or a book. And at the end of the 15 minutes, you're going to say, thank you, Mark. Thank you for letting me come on. I hope I help someone somewhere. And people can find me on LinkedIn. So we'll support the platform, but there's no upsell. There's no, Mark, if they sign up now, I can discount it. There's none of that, because what we feel is just like there's Zoom fatigue, there's transaction fatigue. We live by transactions, but there's transaction fatigue. We get hit on every day by everyone. So we'll see. And I got to tell you, Casey, my guests and I, we're loving doing it. We're
It's so
loving
funny you
it.
should mention that about Zoom fatigue and other platform fatigue, because I was just in a conversation this morning with some people, and it was on a new platform called Clubhouse. And this is kind of an interactive non-video version, so it's just audio, and you break out into rooms and you're talking about whatever the subject matter is in that room. But I think due to the fatigue of kind of being oversold everywhere, these rooms are exactly, well, not exactly, but very similar to what you mentioned, where people are doing Q&A style formats, helping each other from their own experience. So there'll be like a set of speakers in a room, and they'll moderate between themselves, and they'll have people come in and just ask any type of question that they're currently stumbling upon, which is, I think it's the next evolution of a podcast where we're having a conversation, but the listeners out there might not have their actual answers, actual questions answered. But with this platform on Clubhouse, they can literally go in there. And last night I was talking with Grant Cardone and with Ty Lopez, and these are two major influencers that, by me listening to their podcasts or their YouTube videos or their other interactions, I wouldn't really get that interaction directly with them. I'd have to probably listen to hours worth of content to find the answer that I was looking for, but it's more interactive. And I think that's definitely a really good way to pivot moving forward.
Yeah, I'm on Clubhouse, and apparently I'm coming. I I'm seen as one of the elders, meaning I'll be in rooms, and I saw Ty's room, and there were, I think, either a couple hundred or several thousand, and so the rooms are designed where you can have 5 people to 5,000 people, and you can listen in. There are moderators who will invite you to come up to speak. And there's a whole range of things. There are some rooms that are very transactional, rooms on Bitcoin. What I do like about Clubhouse, because I'm really, I really try to help marginalized, hardworking groups of people. So I'm very keen on helping African Americans and women and Hispanics and Asians to get their chance. And about 60% of Clubhouse is African American. So I'm so pleased that they're having a platform where they get to share, where they get to vent, where they get to solve problems. And but I will tell you this, and I'll tell people listening in, it's addictive. You can be in a room for 6 hours, and the moderators will
Yeah.
just share. They'll just pass the baton on to someone else. Uh, and I've been in some of those rooms, and some of the conversations are just so rich. It takes you out of your loneliness. It takes you out of your disconnection. So I think it is a community builder of the future.
And do you think it will last, or do you think it will kind of fade off like some of the other platforms have?
Well, it's interesting because the rooms that I'm in, and I sometimes lead the rooms or come up with the topics. There's a continuum, and on one end, it's all about what's your side hustle, what's your best pitch, how to get funded, and on the other end of the continuum are rooms that are filled with soulfulness, where people are really vulnerable, people are opening up, and it's interesting. And those are the rooms that I tend to be in. And it's interesting because some of the really aggressive, successful people from the other rooms will occasionally come into these rooms, and they start opening up with something that apparently is an epidemic called the imposter syndrome. So it's fascinating because they'll be in one room just selling the heck out of it and telling them how they were successful. And they'll come into one of the soulful rooms and they'll open up and they'll say, sometimes I don't even know if I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's that different level of vulnerability depending on which space you're in at any given time that I really like about that platform also. But let's get back onto you, Mark. You've got such an amazing, an interesting career over the years. Can you talk to us a little bit about how the FBI got in touch with you to help them out?
Well, okay, so my first training and specialty was in suicide prevention. And it was my good fortune that after I finished training, I was going into a fellowship and it fell through. So at the last minute, I just decided to go out on my own. And that was a really fortunate occurrence, even though it was kind of disappointment at the time, because when I was with people, and one of my early mentors was one of the pioneers in the study of suicide and suicide prevention. So early on, he would refer me a lot of my patients, and he would refer me inpatients who had to be discharged, but the residents were nervous to see them because they were still suicidal. They weren't acutely suicidal, but you can't keep them there forever. But in order to be discharged, there needed to be a doctor who was willing to see them. And so he would go up to a consultation and refer them to me. I'd accept them. But here's where the good fortune came in, is as I was listening to these people, multiple suicide attempters, and I looked into their eyes like I'm looking into yours. And uh, gradually I could feel that they were screaming at me with their eyes, saying, "You're checking boxes and I'm running out of time." Because that's what we do. And why I said it was my good fortune is because if I worked in an institution, I would probably keep that clipboard between me and them because I want to make sure and ask the right questions. And here's the difference between clinical professional empathy and surgical empathy. So imagine you're coming in and you are, it's clear that you're not a happy person. Clinical or professional empathy would be, have you been depressed? How long have you been depressed? Uh, have you had negative thoughts? Have you had thoughts of harming yourself? Have you tried to harm yourself? And you're checking boxes, and they're nodding like this. But this is surgical empathy, and it's the tone. It's taking like an FM radio tone versus an AM radio tone. Clinical or professional empathy is more like AM radio, but the FM radio tone would be, "You've been depressed, haven't you?" "Yes." "And you've been really depressed at times where you think you couldn't go on." Is that true? Yeah. And when you felt that, you felt pretty alone, haven't you? Yeah. And there've been some times that got so scary, that's why you ended in the hospital. Is that true? Yeah. Take me to the last time. Take me to the last time where it got really close, and that's what got you into the hospital. And then what happens, Casey, and if you're listening in, when you get someone to open up and tell you about an actual moment and they describe it so clearly that you can see it, they re-feel it, but they're not alone. So when that person opens up and I say, take me to the last time you felt that, and they say, it was 2:30 in the morning. Yeah, tell me about 2:30 in the morning. I couldn't get to bed. I started punching the pillow. Felt like punching the wall. Yeah, and then what happened? I started looking around the house for some expired Benadryl because I just couldn't get to sleep. And then what happened? I didn't know how I was going to make it. And then what happened? The sun rose. But can you see, Casey, that's a much different and engaged way of being with someone than checking boxes.
It's so funny you should mention tonality, because a lot of the master salespeople out there, they all have a section on tonality and the way you should speak and kind of raise or lower your tone and really interact with, in their case, a person to make a sale. But I think the point of the tonality is very similar to the way you described it, is that one, it's bigger than just you. You need to feel part of something more than just yourself as an individual. I think we all have that as a human nature, but the tonality comes in and it's very different from the first version of what you said to the second version of what you said, where you feel connected and you're not alone as well.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. And one of the things that I do in my coaching and training, and a lot of tech companies bring me in, is I think you need to be more compelling and less convincing. And compelling opens people's minds. And when you're compelling, it attracts people towards you so they choose to have more to do with you. But if you're convincing too soon, it's as if they have to have more to do with you. And people don't want to do what they have to do. They want to do what they choose to do.
So if you
So
could
there's
give
some,
an action tip to be more compelling, what would that be?
um, well, I'll give you a formula because something else, because I have done many things. I played Steve Jobs coming back from the dead for about a year and a half. I did it about 15 times. I had the turtleneck, I had the glasses on, and it was all to deliver the formula that Steve Jobs and Elon Musk followed. And by the way, sorry for the ambulances, but by the way, we're in a COVID epicenter, so you'll have to take that with a grain of salt here in Los Angeles. But there's a formula that Steve Jobs and Elon Musk followed. In fact, I gave a talk at Cambridge University by Zoom. It's a CU Tech Talk, how to think like Elon Musk or how to think like Steve Jobs, because they're both compelling. And here's the formula. Whatever you communicate in how you speak, what people read, what people hear, you need to trigger in them, whoa, wow, yes. And what does that mean? Well, when I played Steve Jobs, I talked about discovering the mouse, the graphical user interface at Xerox PARC. And I talked about how, as Steve Jobs, when I laid eyes on it, it was the most amazing thing. So I went, wow, whoa, like I can't believe what I just saw. I see someone using a mouse with icons. So the whoa was I couldn't believe what I was just seeing. And then the wow was, that's astonishing, amazing, unbelievable. The was I'm playing Steve Jobs now. I looked at Wozniak, and Wozniak said, once they go to the mouse, they're not going back. That's the this is too good to ignore. And then the yes was when I went back to our team at Apple and we created the Macintosh. So if you're listening in, if you want to attract investors, you want to attract top talent that can go anywhere, you want to attract customers and clients, you want to trigger in them, whoa, wow, yes. Because if you don't, if your marketing materials don't do that, what you're triggering is, nah, no thanks, never mind, bye. So,
Wow, that's super interesting. That let me make sure I wrote this down. Woo,
no,
wow,
whoa is WHOA, like, whoa, wow.
wow. Okay.
Hmm.
Whoa, wow, yes.
Right. And and I used to give a talk called How to Create Gotta Have It, Gotta Buy It, gotta work there. Because see, if you can create, think of when Apple would introduce a new product. So Apple, the reaction of customers to a new Apple product was exactly the same as what Steve Jobs went through when he saw the mouse. And they line up around, they used to line up around the Apple stores because they had the, whoa, I can't believe what the new iPhone does. Wow, that's amazing, astonishing, unbelievable. Uh, I can see what I can already do with a new camera and all the different things I can do. Yes, I'm going to buy it. So use that with your marketing materials, because if you can create gotta have it, you don't have to sell, you just take sales orders.
That's awesome. That's really good. Thanks for sharing some great actionable tips there, Mark. I like to end with a question, and the question is: if you had to attribute your success between three factors, and those three factors being drive, skill, and how lucky you've been, how would you apportion between those?
Drive, skill, and how lucky I've been. I would say lucky, but in a different text. Lucky, and I will say this to you, if you can get a mentor is different than a coach. I've had 7 mentors, they've all died. And a mentor is someone who believes in you and helps you land in your future. They, uh, they're not just in your specialty. They want to land you in the future you're meant to be in. In fact, I run into some coaching problems when companies hire me. I say, I only want to work with people who want to get better. But in my working with them, I'm going to find the best use of their talent. And that may or may not be in your company. So
Wow,
you may or may not want to hire
interesting. So
me.
you might lose your top talent.
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, because if I can help them realize their top talent, and then I inform you, you know where they would do a better job for you is in this department. I'd much rather do that than you lose your top talent. And when they discover what they're really meant to do, why not have them do it in your company?
And how do you find people receive that information?
Well, I'll tell you, uh, yeah, I've spoken with people, heads of companies, and they say, "You'll walk away from money," and I'll smile at them and I say, "Apparently, I just did." I say, "Look, I only want to work with people who can make the world better, who are talented and smart, and I want to help distill what's the best place for that talent and smartness to be, and 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 that's what I'm about." So if all you want is to get numbers out of them, I'm probably not a good fit. And you'll probably lose this person if they're really talented. But it's up to you.
Yeah, I like that. That makes a lot of sense. And I don't think many people are coming from a place of that much integrity and really wanting to better the person or the people in the team that they're actually working with. So that's really, it's really nice to hear that.
Yeah, I'll tell you one anecdote because I did that with one company, and there was a period in which CEOs I would meet with, they would walk me to my car, and it wasn't to get rid of me. They wanted more time with me. And I remember the person who referred me in, I said, this is crazy. What is going on? And what the person who brought me in said, you know, we're a great company and we used to be great people until we all sold out. And what the CEO liked about you is you haven't sold out, and they wanted more of you because they just don't run into that.
It's so true, and a lot of what we do on the Together CFO side is create high net worth tax structures. But a big element on the back end of that is charitable work and charitable giving, and that's one of the core principles that we instill in our clients is, hey, we can save you hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars per year by restructuring your taxes. But what are you going to do with it? Are you going to actually do some common good? Are you going to do some charitable work, whatever that means to you? Or are you just going to use it all and grow more businesses, which is fine, but we would like you to at least put a portion of it towards doing some better.
Well, I'll tell you, this would be a bold thing to do, and again, I can do it because I'm this solo person. Plus, I'm a lot older than I look, so I've reached this point in my life where it's really important to be true to who I am. But I would consider ramping it up and saying to people, once it feels like you can help them, say, I, we need to tell you about a deal breaker before we work with you. You'd walk away from us? Uh, and they'd say, what? Um, we only work with people who are already or want to commit to leaving the world better than they found it. Because the world is really going to hell. And if people like you and us don't help it, who will? So, yes, we can help you, but we only want to work with people who, as part of our helping them, are also committed to leaving the world better than they found it. And that's a deal breaker for us.
Yeah, it's a really, really great way to phrase that. Often that's something that I struggle with because I'm more of a finance brain than a creative brain.
Yeah, you try to, you see, that was compelling what I just said. You're convincing.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I could work on within my own business. And hopefully, you've helped the audience magnificently with some great action items and some tips. So, Mark, thank you so much for your time. How can people reach out to you? What's the best way for them to do that?
Well, I have Blogoria. So if you go to markgoulston.com, markgoulston.com, you'll see a lot of the stuff that I write. Uh, but on LinkedIn, if you go to Mark Goulston Restream, those are three separate words. It's archiving our no strings attached shows, um, and whatever you hear is yours with no strings attached.
Fantastic. And we'll put the links to both your blog and to your LinkedIn below so people can access that really quickly. Uh, Again, Mark, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. We'll also put the link to your book there. And we didn't really touch on this, but Mark is a top-selling author in over 27 different languages, and he has fantastic insight in his book. So check them out. They're all on Amazon. And yeah, thank you so much, Mark.
Well, thank you for having me, Casey.